Do you like lectures in your D&D supplements? Forge of Foes, a 5e book by Slyfers, includes lengthy section on anti-colonialism that it says is the greatest evil dungeon masters must learn to deal with, and that dealing with it will make the game better. Tips include not all gnolls. Say gnoll bandits are attacking, not gnolls are attacking. Focus on villainy as a choice, not a trait. Yes, we can't have evil monsters anymore. It was just a socio-economic circumstances. No heroes, your players aren't saving anyone. That will make them seem weak.
We are smart.
Well met, travelers. Thanks for stopping by my channel. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back. I really appreciate it. Today, we're going to talk about orcs again. I've talked about orcs a lot on this channel, but typically in the context of The Lord of the Rings and the TV show The Rings of Power. But it has come up again in the context of my favorite game of all time, the best game ever created, Dungeons and Dragons, which has a lot of overlap with Tolkien, but whatever. We've been seeing a lot of interesting discourse around orcs and other changes to the game lately. It kind of broke into the mainstream last week. And I live in Los Angeles. Kind of a lot of stuff happened last week in Los Angeles that prevented me from getting on my computer and making content about this. So I may be a little bit behind the algorithm, but nonetheless, this argument is still going on among the Pakled channels, including the one I'm going to show you right now. Now, I'm not going to watch and react to this entire video. I only picked this one because it is representative of the kind of discourse I've been seeing elsewhere. A lot of Pakled channels, some of whom you've heard of and some of whom you haven't, produced videos making the following argument, usually by implication, but sometimes explicitly. They've said that because the new iteration of Dungeons and Dragons has made orcs into individuals with moral agency, it is therefore a reflection of some kind of moral degeneracy or woke ideology being forced into the game. And I don't quite understand this argument coming from the Pakleds, because generally speaking, the Pakleds are political conservatives. And political conservatives really like to argue that there's no such thing as systemic injustice, that there's no systemic explanation for antisocial or violent behavior. Everything has to be reduced to personal pathologies and personal moral failings. And yet, when that very philosophy is injected into the game of Dungeons and Dragons, suddenly they object, because Dungeons and Dragons has, according to them anyway, always portrayed certain races of beings as being intrinsically evil, and I guess therefore it's okay to kill them indiscriminately. But I don't really think the people making this objection understand their own moral philosophy very well, or moral philosophy in general. So let's break this down, okay? If we say, you know, if you're the dungeon master and you're running an encounter that features orcs attacking a village, and the new iteration of the rules and third-party content related to the rules are encouraging you to use language which says, orc bandits are attacking the village, instead of saying, orcs are attacking the village, what is this really telling you to do? What are the moral implications here? If we say that orc bandits are attacking the village, we're saying that those orcs have a choice in whether they're going to behave in a cruel fashion or not, right? If the orcs have no choice, if they must behave in ways that we would consider evil, then they have no agency, and without agency, there's no point in making a moral judgment at all. Beings who have no agency are amoral. Now, from the perspective of the people they hurt, or, you know, to put this in animal terms, from the perspective of the gazelle, a lion is cruel. But in the macro level, at the level of moral philosophy, the lion has no choice. The lion must eat, and therefore it must hunt and kill. If the lion has no choice, it cannot be evil. If the orc has no choice, it cannot be evil. An orc who chooses to be cruel is far more despicable of a villain than an orc who simply rampages because he has no choice. If it is his intrinsic nature, it makes no sense to assign a moral alignment to him in the game. He's just essentially a robot made out of meat. And I think that this whole discourse aims at an inherent contradiction in conservative moral philosophy, at least in terms of the culture war discourse we see on YouTube. As I mentioned a moment ago, generally speaking, these are people who think that systemic explanations offered by folks on the left for things like crime or mental health problems, people who offer systemic explanations for those are wrong. And the folks who argue that's wrong argue that these problems, like criminality, for instance, or other violent behavior, are explained only by personal choice, only by personal moral failing, only as a result of personal pathologies. There can be no systemic explanations. And yet, at the same time, this same group of people are objecting when systemic explanations for bad behavior are removed from the game of Dungeons and Dragons. When there are no longer people in the game of Dungeons and Dragons who are intrinsically evil and can therefore be slaughtered indiscriminately, suddenly this group of people who think everything is about personal choice and personal morality are upset. They're triggered by this. And I think it points to some very unflattering things about their view of the world. They think in the real world, there are certain groups of people who are intrinsically more antisocial than others. Like, say, criminality, for instance. If there's a particular group of people with a particular set of physical characteristics in our society who are statistically more likely to be engaging in antisocial or criminal behavior, this group of Pakleds wants to believe that the reason for that is because those people are intrinsically more criminal or intrinsically more violent than the rest of us. And therefore, treating them with social compassion through the alleviation of systemic problems like, say, systemic racism or systemic misogyny or systemic queer phobia is simply taking the guardrails off and unleashing monsters onto society. And yet, when you engage them on that point and try to point out that people are malleable, then they want to turn around and say everything is a matter of personal pathology. Well, you can't have it both ways. Either antisocial behavior is the product of systemic forces, or it is the product of personal choice. Now, of course, those of us with an adult moral understanding know that there's no necessary contradiction there. Personal choices are shaped by social factors and vice versa. But this group of people, the Pakleds, don't believe that. They want us to have groups of people it's okay to indiscriminately inflict violence upon, while also at the same time believing the contradictory idea that violence and antisocial behavior are the result of personal morality. They can't have it both ways. So I'm going to need y'all to pick one. Because I've been running this game. I've been dungeon mastering Dungeons and Dragons longer, I think it's safe to say, than most of these Pakleds have been alive. And ever since my Stranger Things childhood, when I picked up this game, and by the way, Stranger Things is all true, this is the way I've always run the game. And the changes in the game that have been appearing in the last 10 years or so are reflections of the way that most people who play the game actually use the game. We're not seeing this injection of personal morality and personal moral agency into orcs and gnolls and mind flayers because Hasbro is trying to enforce a woke ideology on us. Personal responsibility is not the woke ideology. What they're doing is instituting changes that have existed at the grassroots level of the game for decades, pretty much since the beginning. And all of the people complaining about it just are failing their intelligence checks. So that's my 2 gold pieces on the subject. But well, let me know what you think down in the comments. And while you're at it, give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down They're both equal in the algorithm. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell for notifications so, the great God algorithm will let you know when I upload new content. I've got some interesting stuff coming down the line. I'm thinking about getting into live streaming again. And I've got a pretty cool collaboration project in the works with some other content creators. More about both of those in the future. Anyway, until next time, remember that what is best in life is to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and engage in discourse with the women.